Hi everyone, I'm Crystal Diff, Program Coordinator with History Services, and your host for today's Fringe Paranormal, where we're going to dive into Charlotte County's sea serpent. Now, this actually goes into Lee County and Sarasota counties as well, because if you are a giant sea serpent, you need a very large habitat. So we are going to dive into not just Charlotte County's history on this, but also to our surrounding areas so that we can get the full story on this sea serpent. Now, reports of a giant sea serpent go all the way back to the late 1800s. European settlers started to come here in the late 1800s, and they started to come across the Seminole and Seminole legends. Now, this legend is in the Fort Myers area, and the Seminole say that there was a very large snake that lived in a swamp near the Caloosahatchee, and they were warning everybody not to go near that swamp and not to settle there. In 1908, there was a newspaper article that states that Colonel Demir saw what appeared to be a giant log floating on the water, but realized that it was actually a giant snake. Its head stood up about 4 to 5 feet high as it moved on land and about 50 to 60 feet long, with a body that was as wide as a barrel. It was seen moving southeast and was sighted again in Chokoloskee, which is near Everglades City and the 10,000 Islands area. It seemed to have been moving along the southwestern coast of Florida. And all the news articles that I came across with this sea serpent, they all seem to be like a series. And it doesn't seem to be an isolated incident where just one person saw one time, but it just really feels like it's a continuous story that's taking place with different people having different sightings in different areas over time, which really just gives a bigger picture, almost a map of where this sea serpent was located. Now, the densest number of reports that I have been able to find happened in 1962 to 1963. And these are articles from the Fort Myers News Press, and again, different newspapers picking up the infamous sea serpent that was being sighted in this area. So the first sighting that I found during that time frame was by Terry Peterson, who was going along the Myakka River. He had a small boat and he came across this giant creature. He described it as dark brown or olive green and more than 30 inches in circumference. That led to Sam Sutton of Port Charlotte describing an incident that he had with his wife near Cape Hayes. They were sailing in their 21-foot sailboat off of the east end of Cape Hayes a few months prior to Terry's incident, and he saw just this huge thing that was swimming against the tide, and that happens in a few of these stories as well. You'll notice that a lot of the descriptions all end up sounding very similar. And they didn't realize at first what it was. It's like they didn't believe their eyes, but they realized that they were coming across a sea monster. And they said it swam along, exposing a series of arches just like the classic drawings I have seen of sea serpents. It was about 3 feet in circumference with a huge head like a moccasin or a rattler. It was dark in color, maybe dark brown or olive green. We sailed over the area where we had seen it after it disappeared, and to try to get it back, I shifted my weight and knocked my shoe against the side of the boat, and suddenly the water began to churn. We both hit the deck, lying flat in the bottom of the boat. As I looked up, I could see spray and sand spouting as high as the 30-foot mast on the boat. After they saw the water and sand being spewed up the 30-foot mast, they decided to just leave the area and get out of there as fast as they could. And This is one of the most dramatic incidences that or sightings that we have taking place in the Charlotte County area, where it makes it feel almost like we have the Loch Ness Monster right here in Charlotte County. Another one happened in Lemon Creek on Lemon Bay in Inglewood, and this also appeared in the water. James L. Dickinson Jr., who lived in the area, described it to be about 30 foot long as it swam around and about 3 feet around, again, around that 30-inch circumference. Here we have the father, James Dixon Sr., who also saw it with his son, and they said it swam along the mangrove bordering a little island, and as they watched it, it crawled onto a mud flat right near us, and we watched it for several minutes, and it watched us too with those beady eyes. I think the thing was sizing us up for its breakfast, he said. He also describes the head of the serpent to be about 12 inches long. Now, once a few of these sightings started to come out, we have different herpetologists and different experts that are weighing in on what this creature could be. And one of them was herpetologist Kenneth Shane, who was actually a teacher, a science teacher at the middle school, Charlotte Junior High School. And he had gone on expeditions into South America, and he had captured anacondas before. So he was pretty well trained and had a lot of knowledge on snakes, and he really thought that what everybody was seeing was probably an anaconda that had escaped. This happened on the 7th of December, 1962. The monster was sighted again early yesterday morning by Mike Lodick in a branch of the Peace River near San Souci Estates. He saw a snake with a big head about 10 inches long. It was rounded but still kind of flat. He says, as I watched, it arched its neck, if you could call any part of it a neck. It looked in my direction and headed toward me. Suddenly, I could plainly see that it was the biggest snake I have ever seen in my life, about 20 feet long or more. It was bigger around than a gallon jug. It came right toward me. When it was right there, off the end of the dock, I ran and hid behind a tree and watched it. It swam around a while, then went across the stream under some sawgrass, then came out into the middle of the water and headed towards the harbor. By the 14th of December, we have another newspaper article coming out, and this time in it, they say that the serpent may not be faring too well. They had a very cold winter, and because of it being a reptile, they believe that the cold weather would either kill it or slow it down. There was a report from the Reptile Institute in Ocala that there may actually have been 5 or maybe 6 giant snakes that escaped in Southwest Florida over the past 15 years. So they have these experts looking into it. Aside from just the legends and it possibly being a cryptid, they think that it could be just an escaped anaconda. Also, with the different articles that were going out, it spurred some other visitors or citizens from the area to send in letters to say that they also have seen this giant sea creature in Charlotte County, Lee County, or Sarasota County. So a lot of different reports started to come in. Once one person decided to tell their story, it just spurred everyone else to start telling their own tales of their own sightings. By December 29th, 1962, they believe that there are more than one of these sea serpents in the area, and that it may actually have babies. One of them may have had babies because they were also seeing 6-foot versions of the giant sea serpent around the same areas that they were sighting the very large, monstrous creatures. So they say to date, the monster has been sighted off Cape Hayes, in Lemon Creek on Lemon Bay, in the Myakka River, Peace River, and in Shell and Alligator Creek, and all the descriptions are similar. The most concentrated sightings are in the Myakka and Shell Creek area. On February 4th, 1963, we have a news article titled "Giant Serpent Sighted Again Off Charlotte Harbor's Pier." So this is a woman who described some of the sightings. She said she didn't really believe anybody else's stories of this serpent until she saw it for herself. She said it had a head as big as a man, about a foot long, and it was sticking about 2 feet out of the water, and it was watching people as they were fishing along the pier. She said while it watched, it swayed its head back and forth and raised its head a little higher out of the water. And all of a sudden, with a swish of its body, it jumped into the water and was gone. She didn't originally tell everybody her story because she thought that everybody would just laugh at her. And finally, she decided to send in a report and tell people what she had seen because she didn't want anybody else who had seen it to feel that they were making up stories and trying to just help everybody out with understanding that this thing was real, that people were seeing. And now she knows how everybody felt having that thing very close to her. It made everybody very scared. Obviously, people are hiding behind trees. They're completely leaving the area to never come back again. So this is really scaring a lot of the citizens here. And seeing it in person, she now understands how scary that it felt to see it right near you. She says, I'll bet that thing could swallow a man without even a hiccup, and that it was about as long as a telephone pole. We have Albert Eisenhoff on the Shell Creek area said it was definitely a snake because we could clearly see its head about a foot above the water. Its neck was arched, and at times we could see its tail above the water. It was swimming against the current and pretty fast too, faster than a man could walk. I'd say about 7 miles an hour. I would say it was much longer than 10 feet because he could only see about 10 feet of it above the water, but it was very coiled, so he couldn't see it just in a straight line. So he wasn't sure how big it was, but he knew that it was over 10 feet. Mike Lodick lives a few hundred yards from Eisenhoff, who also saw the serpent close up earlier in the year when it swam within feet of him as he checked a crab trap at the end of his deck. So now we have multiple people in the same area, the same housing district, that are seeing the same sea monster. So as more and more people start to look into what this creature is it a cryptid? Is it an anaconda? They start to hear all of these stories from people and start to really dig up some information on some of the zoos and circuses and even people who kept reptiles as pets in the area who have claimed to have lost some of their reptiles. And so some of the accounts, like the one I said previously, where it was noted that at least 5 to 6 snakes have been released, they start to really line up those stories so that they can get an account for how many of these snakes were actually lost in our area. So we're actually moving away from it being this great cryptid creature, this sea monster that's living here, to more of an escaped anaconda. A 16-foot anaconda escaped from Page Combined Shows, which played Punta Gorda in 1959. This is from the Fort Myers News Press on the 3rd of December, 1962. A 27-foot anaconda reportedly escaped from Rogers Brothers Circus as it passed through Punta Gorda in 1951. So they're also trying to look at the dates that these animals escaped, because the anacondas have about a 30-year life expectancy. So they're checking the years to make sure that it matches up with the lifespan of an actual anaconda. Then we have one of my favorite stories in this whole series, which is from Ralph Tinsley. So this is a Fort Myers News Press article, the 6th of December, 1962. And it says, Carnival Hand says he hauled pet anaconda into Everglades. Feared safari would slay Reggie. So Ralph Tinsley, he was retired from show business, and part of his act, he had an anaconda who he named Reggie. So Reggie had lived with him, and he had retired from the circus or carnival 8 years previous. So now Reggie was just living with him. They lived off of Cape Hayes in a trailer. So he brought this 12-foot anaconda into his home, so the anaconda would sleep with him. Reggie would sleep with him in his bed until he got too big. Then he made him a bed underneath his bed, but when Reggie got too big for that, he made him a bed underneath his trailer. And he said that Reggie was very kind and very calm, and he even would play with some of the dogs from the other residents in the trailer park, but he never was aggressive at all. And Mr. Tinsley said that he would drive up and down the highway to find fresh roadkill to give to Reggie. So Reggie was never really aggressive because he never learned how to capture and kill prey himself. He was always just fed by Mr. Tinsley. But when he heard that all of these people were out looking for the snake, people were scared of this snake, he really didn't want anybody to hurt Reggie and find out about Reggie, especially since Reggie decided to start being a little bit more adventurous and would go out for day trips where he would just leave for a day or two at a time and then come back when he was ready. So he wasn't really sure what Reggie was up to, and he didn't want anybody to spot Reggie and hurt or kill Reggie. So he said that he got a trailer and brought him out into the Everglades and set him free. But at the end of the article, they try to check to see whether he actually did rent a trailer out to the Everglades, but nobody could find any receipts or any evidence that he actually did rent a trailer and bring Reggie out into the Everglades. So people weren't sure whether it was Reggie they were seeing or not. There was another 16-foot python that escaped a few years previous to 1963 when this article went out, where somebody who had this reptile as a pet near Shell Creek, he lost his 16-foot python and didn't want to tell anybody. He didn't want to alarm anybody that his snake had escaped, so he just kept it quiet. And he said it was just a little one, only about 15 feet. So there's a lot of possibilities here, and they keep coming. Realtor Dick Pritchett brought the Rogers Brothers Circus when it went bankrupt, and in the deal he ended up getting a tiger, an anaconda, and, quote, a bunch of monkeys. So he ended up being able to sell the tiger to another circus, but the anaconda escaped, and also the monkeys. He said the monkeys ended up hanging around the edge of the city for a while and then eventually moved on, but he has no idea what happened to the anaconda. So all these reports, we have all these reports of these snakes out now, either a giant anaconda, a snake that we know of from South America, or a large cryptid sea monster. And a lot of people wanted to capture it. They were scared. So they started to create crews. There was a crew in Charlotte County and in Sarasota County, and the term safari was coined by County Commissioner John Jack, who was the first to propose these and also one of the first to become part of the team. There were also a lot of specialists that were called on to become part of this. So you have Kenneth Shane, who was the science teacher at Charlotte Junior High. We also have Dr. Eugenie Clark, who was asked her expertise on this, and she's an internationally famous marine biologist. Many know Eugenie Clark from the Cape Hayes Marine Lab history, and she also worked at Mote Marine Laboratory as well. So they asked her to weigh in on the sea creature, and she actually became one of the team leads for Sarasota. So we have John Jack, Eugenie Clark, Kenneth Shane, Conservation Officer Bill King, and Ross Allen, who's another well-known herpetologist, teamed with locals Vic Thompson, Andy Crane, Fed Ferris, and Ron Anderson. We also had local animal trainers, Swede and Hunky Johnson, and in the end, they had about 10 private planes and over 40 boats that were canvassing the Charlotte County and Sarasota areas, just private citizens willing to volunteer to help capture this creature. And they were hoping to capture it alive so that they could put it into captivity in a zoo. So for the most part, these crews were put together to capture it alive, but there were other citizens that were trying to hurt it or possibly kill it so that it would not be in the area where they lived. As these crews started to gain notoriety, and again, more and more stories start popping up in the papers, you have people all the way in San Francisco who are now trying to come to this area to hunt the sea serpent. And there was a $5,000 reward for the 30-foot anaconda. So it did gain some attention, not just in the local area, but around the entire nation. After 1963, it kind of dropped off from there. I don't believe that they ever actually caught the anaconda or sea creature, so they're possibly still out there, and they were breeding. A lot of people were seeing the babies, which were about 6 feet in length and looked a spitting image of the adults, but just a miniature version. So we're not sure exactly how many were out there and how many were even caught. In 1966, another article went out where somebody saw another very large serpent in the Sarasota area. And they alerted Charlotte County because they wanted to say that the Charlotte County sea serpent may actually still be alive. Sarasota County Deputy Gerald Curry was near Curry Creek Bridge, and he said that he reported what to be about a 10-foot snake, and this was in December 30th of 1966. And he said that the snake was dead, that he went right up to it, he opened its mouth, and it looked completely dead. He walked away so that he could try to, get something to pick up the snake with and alert everybody to where the snake was. But when he went back to the location, the snake was completely gone. So nobody knows whether it was dragged off or whether it was still alive and just slithered away. So they said serpent watchers look sharp. So the search continued, and the legend continues to this day of the sea serpent of Charlotte County. And we may never know whether it was a cryptid or an anaconda. Being in Florida, I feel like both of them could have probably lived perfectly happy in our waters here. If you want to learn more about some of the articles that I talked about in my presentation today, you can go to our discussion board at padlet.com/history services/Fringe Paranormal. So you can join the discussion and learn a little bit more and read these articles that I'm talking about today. Thank you for watching Fringe Paranormal, and I will see you next month.